I'm rejoined here in our studio by Francesca Page, and we are joined now via Skype from Jerusalem by Newsmax writer Elliot Jager. Elliot, we know it's about supper time there in Jerusalem. We thank you for making time for us today here on America's Forum.
My pleasure, JD.
Elliot, we heard Josh Earnest call for the Israelis to exercise restraint. How is that admonition being received in Israel?
Well, frankly, I think what is the Israeli cabinet right now is trying to decide, and began deciding actually before the funeral, and they've had several meetings, and there are a whole range of issues and options that are on the table. And quite frankly, what the press secretary in the White House has to say is not being heavily considered. I think what really matters, I think, for the defense minister and for the prime minister is to react with the head and not with the gut. Both of them have used that expression in terms of laying out the options of what Israel needs to do and can do. React with the head, not with the gut, because after all, we just went through this nationwide, nationally televised funeral yesterday, and a cheerful farewell to these three young teenagers. So,
Elliot, in the aftermath of this very tragic event, what are you seeing on the ground there? What's the mood like?
well, I think I should tell you that here in Jerusalem, from about 4 o'clock this morning, there's been stress and tension because an Arab teenager was found. We had these reports of an Arab teenager who'd been abducted by a car by a car that came into the neighborhood. It took him away, and a few hours later, his body was found. And immediately, you asked what's going on in Jerusalem. Immediately, accusations were made that he was kidnapped in retribution for what happened to the teenager by two or three Jewish men, and his body was then found on the other side of town. And with that, this was at 4 o'clock in the morning when the report was that he disappeared. A few hours later, his body was found. With that, with dawn this morning, there have been riots in some of the Arab neighborhoods of Jerusalem. Very violent, perhaps the most violent riots that we've seen since the year 2000, which was the beginning of the second Intifada. So there's a tremendous amount of strain and stress. And I should tell you that there is absolutely no indication that this young fella, whose name is Mohammed Hussein Abdul Kadir, who's about 16, 17 years old, lives in a middle-class Jerusalem neighborhood called Shuafat. It's not at all clear that he was abducted by anybody who didn't know him. In other words, it's possibly a criminal act that happened within the clan that he's a member of. Police are trying to figure out whether or not this was indeed a retribution, or whether or not it had something to do with, what's called family honor in this part of the world. When a boy is not quite what you want him to be, and you take him out and kill him. So there's been but be that as it may, the violence, hundreds and hundreds of neighborhood youths and rioted. They burned the light rail station near their neighborhood, and their police heavily concentrated. Rail service was discontinued. So, I mean, there's a sense of stress in Jerusalem today, compounded by, right now, some serious brush fires, which may or may not be arson. So there's an overall sense of stress. There was at the time that there was the funeral yesterday, which was very dignified. There were ultra-extremist Jews who marched in Jerusalem, yelling all sorts of anti-Arab slogans. So that also raised stress and tension in town.
So Elliot, as you're pointing this out, And you talk about the rioting in the Arab sections of Jerusalem, whether this was an Islamic honor killing or Jewish vigilantism, retribution, whatever the source, when you have the civil unrest, I'm wondering, are there any reports as to loss of life? Because it sounds like these are very serious riots going on there in Jerusalem.
Well, fortunately, there's no loss of life. Fortunately, the Israeli police are well equipped with riot gear and can deal with even major urban riot of this kind. But I have to point out to you that the sun is shining still here in Jerusalem. The sky is blue. The tourists are in the hotels, and in most parts of Jerusalem, life goes on as usual. But this is a neighborhood on the northern end of town, as I said, the light rail just passes by the neighborhood onto another neighborhood, and there's a tremendous amount of intermingling between Jewish neighborhoods and the Arab neighborhoods, and frankly, the reaction of the local community to this boy's disappearance is very upsetting to most Israeli Jews, because immediately the rumor, the conspiratorial rumor started that they were abducted by settlers, whatever that means. And again, it was dark. There's no way anyone could actually know any of that. And I'm hopeful that in the next 24, 48 hours, the police will be able to crack this case and tell us what really happened.
Elliot, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that whoever was involved in this kidnapping and the murder would bear the consequences. But have you actually seen any of these consequences played out yet?
Well, we're talking about the teenagers who were abducted.
Correct. Yes.
Well, what's happened? I think we've seen some consequences already. I should explain that whatever advances are made in that investigation are under wraps due to court order, and we really can't talk about what's happening very specifically in that regard. But I can tell you that that a lot of the Hamas infrastructure in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, has been turned upside down. You know that Hamas, although it doesn't operate militarily in the West Bank, quite obviously, because Israel has security control. Within the Arab Palestinian Authority areas of the West Bank, Hamas has set up a whole network of social service offices and so on. And those, of course, are fronts for Hamas. So I can tell you that most of those offices have been closed. A lot of money has been confiscated. Of course, this money is not really used for philanthropic purposes. I don't know if I have to point that out. Quite a few guns have been taken in, ammunition, guns, and so on. And of course, most important, just about everybody who's anybody in the Hamas political or military structure has been taken into custody. This helps reverse, to some extent, the prisoners who were released as part of the Gilad Shalit deal and sent back to Judea and Samaria. So we've undone some of the damage of that deal. We tamped down on Hamas in the West Bank. So I think these are positive that have happened in the last 18 or 19 days in the shadow of the tragedy of the boys who were abducted and apparently killed immediately.
Elliot, a minute left and maybe 30 seconds. We'll get your comment on the broader notion. You have this situation. There are some who are concerned that this takes preeminence, the retaliatory actions against Hamas. But I'm just curious, again, about 30 seconds, how much does the Iranian situation and Iranian nukes possibly start to loom over the nation of Israel in terms of a policy priority?
Look, there are always priorities, and then there are day-to-day things you just have to take care of. Obviously, there is no greater priority than stopping the Iranians from going nuclear. That is Israel's constant and top priority. That doesn't change whatever else happens on the ground day to day.
Elliot Jager.
Top priority, and it should be the priority, of course, of the rest of the free world.
And we'll leave it there. Elliot Jager checking in from Jerusalem. We thank you for your time. We're coming right back.